by Usman Kuyate. Please welcome the renowned Ina Moja.
If the world thinks that you're not enough, they cannot feel the fire in your bones. Here you stand in your truth and your flaws. Who are they to throw you their stones? I will rise with you, I will stand with you. If I have to, I will fight for you. Ang awili kanjo, ang adone sera. Ni muso kelen kumana, muso keme kambora. Ni kele kumana, muso keme de kambora. Ni kele kumana, muso keme de kambora. We will come as one, we will lead as one. If we have to, we will fight as one. Ang awili kanjo, ang adone sera. Ni muso kelen kumana, muso keme kambora. Ni kele kumana, muso keme de kambora. Ni kele kumana, muso keme de kambora. I will rise with you, I will stand with you. If I have to, I will fight for you. Thank you very much. Thank you. The next song is a song that I wrote about water. From the region where I come from, it's very difficult to access to water. I used to walk 100 miles to get water for my people. Used to walk 100 miles to get water, to get water. I used to walk 100 miles to get water for my people. Used to walk 100 miles to get water, to get water. Ubita maladong odo katajide ini sunguruniu kamaleniu beki bramatadi doni angama sau delila dugutigi kumana robneu lairutara ngahali sini ube kolonji de solila namahina angamola ube sege ube nyanina uha kebe bwana nanyuto kono na filila. I used to walk 100 miles to get water for my people. Used to walk 100 miles to get water, to get water. But life gets harder and the desert gets the blues. I dare you, walk a mile inside our shoes. My brothers are marching 1,000 miles. They all have the same dream, a broken smile, running away from hell straight to the sea. Get on the boats cause they have to see the El Dorado on the other side. The El Dorado on the other side. The El Dorado on the other side. I used to walk 100 miles to get water for my people. Used to walk 100 miles to get water, to get water. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Aye ya fanema imalo jarabi manivo. Aye ya fanema imalo jarabi manivo. Sente jarabi fe, bolo te jarabi fe, sanun te jarabi fe, wari te jarabi fe, banamundo afura dunte dogo toro fe. Adun jarabi gwelema. Inale kana furuma kufente ne fene dumbele fe. Terile kana furuma kufente ne fene dumbele fe. Ikana di mi, ikana kasi, ikana amigo jarabi kosom. Ikana di mi, ikana kasi, ikana amigo jarabi kosom. Munkerilla jarabi, munkerilla ne dumbele fe. Munkerilla ma chérie, munkerilla ne dumbele fe. Aye ya fanema, imalo jarabi manibo, sente jarabi fe. Bolo te jarabi fe, sanun te jarabi fe, wari te jarabi fe, banamundo afura dunte dodoro fe, adun jarabi gwelema. Banamundo afura dunte dogo toro fe, adun jarabi gwelema. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. My name is Ina Moja. I was born in Mali, and I don't really know how I got here, but I just made a great journey across the Sahel. I was inspired by a project called the Great Green Wall, and I worked with the UN Convention to Combat Desertification to make a documentary to show the people of the Sahel and how resilient, how brave they are, how they are taking their destiny into their own hands. And some say that an 8,000 kilometer of wall is too ambitious, but I don't agree with that. Why dream small? We have to dream big. Otherwise, why dream at all? With the acceleration of our changing climate, we are now in a race against time. And I set out on this journey to record an album that captured the spirit of an African dream. And my faith in big ideas survives through my faith in the people. And the people that I've met in the Sahel, where I come from, were so inspiring that I wanted to share everything that they are living. It won't be easy. The road to revolution is long and winding. And we sow seeds in our lifetime so other hands may harvest. And as a daughter of the Sahel, this is now my mission, to help the people of the Sahel, to help combat desertification, and to help them thrive instead of fleeing. In a region rife with adversity, scarcity of food and water, conflict and migration, I want to do something. I believe that we can make a change. And as an African child, I strongly believe that my continent deserves better. And I ask you to join me in this mission. Thank you very much for having me here today. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the 4 co-hosts of today's One Planet Summit. President of the French Republic, Emmanuel Macron. Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Amina Mohammed. President of the World Bank Group, Dr. Jim Yong Kim. And UN Special Envoy for Climate Action, Michael Bloomberg. The President of the Republic of Albania, the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, the Federal President of the Republic of Austria, the Prime Minister of Barbados, the President of the Republic of Botswana, the Prime Minister of the Republic of Bulgaria, the President of the Republic of Croatia, the Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Denmark, the Prime Minister of the Republic of Fiji, the President of the Republic of Finland, the Prime Minister of Grenada, the Vice President of the European Commission, the Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, the Secretary General of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the President of Inter-American Development Bank, the Prime Minister of Jamaica, the President of the Republic of Kenya, the Prime Minister of the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg, the Prime Minister of Malaysia, the President of the Republic of the Marshall Islands, the Prime Minister of the Republic of Mauritius, the President of the United Mexican States, the Prime Minister of Montenegro, the Premier of Montserrat, the Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Morocco, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, the Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Norway, the President of the Portuguese Republic, the President of the Republic of Rwanda, the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, the Prime Minister of the Republic of Serbia, the Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Spain, the President of the Togolese Republic, the Prime Minister of Tuvalu, the Vice President of the Republic of Côte d'Ivoire, the Assistant Minister of Foreign Affairs for the People's Republic of China, the Minister of External Affairs of the Republic of India. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Our program will now continue.
Oh, shit. Fun fact, planet Earth is 4.5 billion years old. Mankind, about 140,000 years old. Let me put that in perspective. If you condense the Earth's lifespan into 24 hours, that's one full day that we have been here on this planet for, drum roll please, 3 seconds. Three seconds. And look what we've done. We have modestly named ourselves Homo sapiens, meaning wise man. But are we really so wise? I mean, if we were wise, we would not be shocked when we see storms stronger than ever before, more hurricanes, wildfires, and droughts than ever before, because there's more pollution than ever before, more carbon, more trees cut down than ever before. At a record pace, we have increased the extinction of animals by 1,000 times the normal rate. What a feat. In the next 10 to 100 years, every beloved animal character in every children's book is predicted to go extinct. Lions, gone. Tigers, gone. Gorilla, elephant, polar bear, gone. In 3 seconds, species that have been here before us will be gone because of us. In 3 seconds.
Our time to do something about climate change is up.
Climate change is not just about melting ice caps thousands of miles away.
Increased coastal flooding is happening due to climate change.
Some people have to suffer because of how awfully polluted the world is.
We are all part of the solution.
Acting locally and acting globally.
The people of my country depends in large part to the choices we make today.
Engage and take action right away.
We are family. Literally, one planet, everything, every species is connected genetically from the sunflower to the sunfish. This is what we must realize before it is too late. Why can't we drink water that is clean, marvel at trees, breathe air free of toxins? These are natural rights. It is too late to be pessimistic. It is time to innovate. It is time to stop fighting the old system and start creating a new system where we support organizations that not only have sustainability but thrivability as the endeavor. See, we will get out of this mess like we have always gotten out of things, together.
Good leaders are also good followers.
Climate discussion has moved from politics into business and finance.
It's done by individuals, it's done by corporations, and it's done by local governments.
Make our planet great again.
It is up to us to take care of this planet. It is our only home. We must globally warm our hearts and change the climate of our souls and realize that we are not apart from nature. We are a part of nature. And to betray nature is to betray us. And to save nature is to save us. We are part of one planet. This is the sum of summit. We should speak from one voice together today. Let's do it right now.
Please welcome founder and CEO of Thrive Global and the MC for today's One Planet Summit, Arianna Huffington.
Thank you all for coming. It is my great honor and privilege to welcome you to the second One Planet Summit in New York. The One Planet Summit, as we all know, was launched in December of last year in Paris by France, the United Nations, and the World Bank. The mission is very clear: to accelerate the implementation of the Paris Agreement by speeding up the global commitments. This will require the collective mobilization of all stakeholders. And on this issue, everybody is a stakeholder, whether governments or the private sector or individual citizens. Throughout this afternoon, we'll engage with key public and private stakeholders, with citizens and high-level leaders to review progress made in the implementation of the commitments announced last year at the first One Planet Summit, and to scale up collaborative efforts, particularly from the world of finance. We have a very busy and exciting program this afternoon, so let's get started. And to start us off, I'm thrilled to welcome the President of France, President Emmanuel Macron, who this morning at the United Nations gave a stirring and impassioned speech and a very quiet but very pointed rebuke to another president. President Macron, welcome.
Thank you very much, dear friends. I want to reassure you, I will not give a long speech and I will not slam. Thanks for being here. When we decided, the 12th of December last year, to launch this initiative with World Bank and United Nations, and thanks, dear Jim and Amina, to be here, what we wanted to do is to resist from a sort of a fate as it was presented by a lot of people. Paris Agreement was supposed to be dead because of one decision. And what we did all together, and I want to thank all of you for your commitments last year, but for your presence here today, is that because of our decision and our commitment, it is even more than that. And I want to especially thank Mike Bloomberg for his personal commitment and the organization of today. Thanks very much, Mike, on top of us for that. And I think we have three critical points that we addressed. First, climate change is not an agreement or a declaration made by heads of states and governments. It's no more the case. That's a question of political leaders, business leaders, I mean investors, regulators, entrepreneurs, CEOs. That's a matter for local constituencies, and that's a matter for citizens. And all together, indeed, these stakeholders are the ones to decide. And that's the very first decision we took, the 12th of December. Let's mobilize ourselves. We have the C40, we have the Paris Agreement Club, we have all the different initiatives, and let's join everything to work together and unify our efforts. The second critical point is about action and delivery. You speak to make a pledge or a commitment. And that's what we did with these 12 commitments last year, and with first results. And today I want to thank you because I will give the mic to a lot of people who will announce new commitments. And myself, in the conclusion, I will commit myself for France for one additional thing. And it's very important because what we need is action. And I want to thank you because here in this room, you have a lot of leaders present. And I know the price of your time and your life, but you're here to commit yourself to deliver. For Caribbean, for Africa, for vulnerable states, we took first decisions, first commitments, first pledges, and it's very important. And the third critical point we made is about following the results, accountability. We are not here just to speak, but to be accountable. I mean, what we announced the 12th of December, a lot of you and myself, we will be accountable for it. Here we will see what is working and what is not working. And I think it's very important because nobody will believe one sec that we are delivering perfectly well. So we had first results for me on different topics and fronts. We need more projects, more concrete projects for smart cities, for instance, for solar initiatives. And I think we have a lot of things to be done. I hope we will bridge the gap through the announcements or in the coming months. So all in all, the mobilization today, this gathering, is exceptional because it's not just to speak. And, I mean, your show was much more telling than any speech. Because I think you express this, I mean, precise this emergency, this deep feeling we have with a lot of strength. What we need, what is waited from us, is action. Small and big action. We have to shift 1/3 of the global financing to the financing of climate change and new climate action. This is, all in all, the final goal. So governments, World Bank, all the development banks, business leaders and investors, this is our job. Now we have to deliver. So thanks very much for being here. Thanks to the leaders present in this room. I think everybody is waiting for us, and everybody today wants us just to accelerate. Thank you. Amina, I will give the floor to the Under-Secretary General, Amina Mohamed. Thank you.
Does it? Yep, it does work. Thank you very much. I believe now that we have a video or a special message from the Secretary General of the United Nations.
President Macron, World Bank President Jim Kim, Climate Envoy Bloomberg, ladies and gentlemen. The United Nations is once again pleased to co-host the One Planet Summit. I welcome your efforts to scale up climate action. We need far greater ambition, and we need it now. The world faces a major global crisis, and scientists are worried we will miss the targets agreed on the Paris Agreement. Climate change is still running faster than we are. But we can win this race. Technology is on our side, and the green economy offers a path to prosperity. Climate action and economic progress are mutually supportive. Time is of the essence. I count on your commitment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now for gender balance, you have to listen to me, the Deputy Secretary General. President Macron, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the summit really has come at a crucial time. And if anyone heard about any thumping in the United Nations, it was President Macron telling us that yesterday, and all we could say was, can you come more often? Heat waves, wildfires, and extreme flooding have again caused death, distress, as 2018 has become the 5th warmest year on record. What makes these events even more devastating is that we were warned. For decades, we've been told that the carbon dioxide that we pump into the atmosphere will change our climate. We've also been told what this means: rising sea levels, more floods, worse droughts, and stronger, more destructive storms. When world leaders signed that Paris Agreement, they agreed to limit the temperature to 2 degrees or below and to strive for 1.5. These targets were set to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. Scientists are now really worried that we will miss these targets. According to a recent UN study, the commitments made by parties to the Paris Agreement represent only 1/3 of what is needed. So if we do not reverse the trend by 2020, it may be impossible to meet the 1.5-degree goal. This is not a tomorrow problem. It is actually today's crisis, but it is also an opportunity. We need to do more, and we need to do it quickly. We need more ambition, more action between now and 2020. We do have the solutions, the resources, and the technology, so we know what to do. If we fail to meet this challenge, history certainly won't be kind to us, but we do need a greater sense of urgency. So I'm encouraged to see today so many business leaders and government leaders that are with us demonstrating climate leadership. There are many acts that inspire us. Today we have Mahindra. Mahindra recently announced a target to become carbon neutral by 2040. Walmart and Unilever will be adding to their work, deforestation, and reducing emissions in their supply chains. The Dutch bank ING will reduce financing of coal power generation to almost zero by 2025. The Yes Bank in India has committed to mobilize $1 billion by 2023 and $5 billion by 2030 for solar energy projects. Google has launched its Environmental Insights Explorer map to the vital signs of the planet. And earlier this week, we met with representatives of the oil and gas industries and welcomed their commitment to transform their industries, 13 of them committing to reduce emissions of methane by 350,000 tons. We need all of these partners on board. We need business leaders here today to mobilize leaders in other sectors, your constituencies, such as cement, steel, which we know are resource and energy intensive. The recent Global Climate Action Summit in San Francisco demonstrated the vast opportunities of climate action. More than 500 commitments came to New York to this meeting. Today's summit can help us to further our collective goal in addressing climate change. We must create unstoppable momentum towards COP24 in Poland in December. Katowice is critical, and the Secretary General's Climate Summit in 2019, all helping us to hit the ambitions of 2020 and beyond. These efforts are also essential to demonstrate progress prior to the 2020 UN Oceans Conference in Portugal, as well as the critical 2020 climate COP. Friends and colleagues, the climate action initiatives we see around the world today are truly inspiring. But as the Secretary General has reminded us, climate change is certainly running faster than we are. And that is why convening the summit in 2019 next year is to mobilize the ambition, again, action, delivery, and the finance for 2020 and beyond. The climate summit will target sectors that create the most emissions and the areas where building resilience will make the biggest difference. And we know that over 81% of those emissions come from the G20, so we're out there to target a few countries. The Secretary General will continue to call for your leadership from countries, from cities, businesses, and civil society in the run-up to Climate COP 2020. And the Secretary General has asked President Macron of France and Prime Minister Holness of Jamaica to spearhead progress on the pledge to mobilize $100 billion a year of climate by 2020 through a combined effort of public and private contributions. He has also asked his Special Envoy, Michael Bloomberg, to lead a climate finance leadership initiative to support global mobilization of private capital. And so, ladies and gentlemen, this One Planet Summit is an important moment in the lead up to the climate summit. While I say that, I hope that we will be someplace again this time next year before the summit. And we must make that momentum for COP24 this our next milestone. We must ensure that implementation of our guidelines, that roadmap for the Paris Agreement, are adopted and show the world that leaders remain committed. We do share a collective responsibility to honor the Paris Agreement. It was a promise of all of us, and reaffirm that together is how we will succeed as a global community. We owe it to younger generations and those yet unborn. They will inherit the decisions that we make today. Thank you. It's my honor and pleasure to invite Mike Bloomberg up to the stage.
Hello, everyone, and Amina, thank you very much for those words. I love listening to you talk. It makes so much sense. And you and the Secretary General make an awesome combination, and you really are changing this world, so thank you. Yes? Let me also thank President Macron for his leadership on climate change and for bringing us all together. He does not lack enthusiasm. He does not lack belief, and he does not lack results. And I just want you to know that we all around the world watch you with great admiration. You're doing a great job, not just for France, but for the world, so thank you. Now, I wish I could have said all that in French, but the truth is, French was my worst subject in high school. and it hasn't gotten any better. And when I say the worst, you have to be pretty far down the list with my academic record. Anyways, I want to thank all of you for being here, including the heads of state who are making the time during a busy week at the United Nations. The truth is, fighting climate change requires collaboration, not just between nations, but between government and business and between cities, states, and regions. And here in the U.S., we've seen how much can be achieved when these groups work together. Just 2 weeks ago, I joined California Governor Jerry Brown to release a new report called Fulfilling America's Pledge. And it shows that the United States is already halfway to our Paris Agreement of a goal of cutting carbon emissions by 26% by the year 2025. Think about that. With no help from the federal government, America is already halfway there. And it's because of individuals and corporations and local governments in America that all understand just how important this is. This is not a political issue. It's not a partisan issue. This is about the future of this planet. Thank you. You can vote. You can certainly applaud for them, what they did there. I should also add that Jerry Brown's report outlines steps that cities, states, businesses, and citizens can take to get us the rest of the way there, even without any help from Washington. But we all know Paris was just the beginning. We urgently need to do more and faster to meet this challenge. Not enough capital is flowing to projects that cut carbon emissions and protect communities from harm. And wealthy countries have a long ways to go in order to fulfill our commitment to direct $100 billion per year by 2020 to help developing countries address climate change. This is a critically important challenge, and it is one I'll be focusing on as my role as Special Envoy. To give you one example, our foundation is helping to lead the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, which was created by the Governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney. The task force is helping companies measure and report the risks that they face from climate change, and that allows them to reduce their exposure, which can make them more attractive to investors. The market's allocation of capital is a powerful weapon in the fight against climate change. And over the next year, our foundation will work with countries, cities, and companies to build on that progress, the progress we are making in climate finance. We will also work with the UN to prepare a report on the state of climate finance to help inform the G7 finance ministers meeting next summer and the UN's climate summit here in New York next September. So I want to thank President Macron for making climate finance a central focus today and for his strong leadership on this issue. All of us have a role to play, and I'm looking forward to seeing the new partnerships and investments that come out of this summer. Thank you all for participating.
Thank you so much, Mayor Bloomberg. You truly have been such an inspiring leader on this issue. And as we've heard from Mayor Bloomberg, the engagement of finance and of the private sector will be key to implementing the Paris Agreement. In our interconnected world, climate change is too big of a challenge to be left to governments alone. We are going to need the full commitment, collaboration, and creativity of every sector of society and of our economies. That's why the One Planet Summit is showcasing the most innovative tools of finance to redirect capital to where it can be most effective in creating sustainable economies. We all know it. Climate change is no longer this thing in the future we need to worry about. It's here, and it's wreaking havoc in many parts of the world. But today is about solutions, and it is solutions that we are going to be showcasing. As Winston Churchill said during the Second World War, action this day. And this is the message that we all want to take with us when we live today. And speaking of solutions, please welcome now Johan Rockström, an internationally recognized scientist and the co-director of the Potsdam Institute of Climate Impact Research.
Heads of state, Your Excellencies, friends of planet Earth, humanity has reached a critical juncture. We are actually scientifically at risk of destabilizing the whole Earth system. We've actually reached the warmest temperature on Earth since the last ice age, 12,000 years ago. In 2018, the Earth system, for the first time, has started to send invoices to societies from the entire world, from the forest fires in California, to the floods in Kerala, to the deaths in Japan. Climate change is occurring faster than science predicted it should. And it's not only having direct human impacts, it's also amplifying geopolitical instability, impacting migration, and potentially social stability. The only reason why we have not exceeded 2 degrees Celsius already is the resilience of the Earth system, the ability of nature to absorb and dampen, to cool the Earth system. We are now, for the first time, seeing evidence of the cracks in Earth's capacity to absorb, to keep the planet as a sink for both carbon and heat. Now, here is the latest scientific evidence on the potential tipping points in the Earth system. What you see here is the rising evidence that we risk crossing tipping points across the whole system, where these can occur already at 1 to 3 degrees Celsius warming, shown here in yellow, systems like destabilizing the Greenland ice sheet, destabilizing and collapsing coral reef systems, and gradual decline of carbon sinks in natural ecosystems on land and in oceans. The consequences of this is that the Earth may shift from being a carbon sink to becoming a carbon source, that nature starts emitting greenhouse gases. Earth shifts from being a friend to becoming a foe, from self-cooling to self-warming. This could trigger a cascading domino pattern, leading to irreversible self-amplified warming that could lead us on a path towards unmanageable warming, a hothouse Earth. We conclude scientifically that the planetary threshold where we might be tipping over to this amplification may be as low as 2 degrees Celsius. This, dear friends, provides tremendous scientific support for the Paris Climate Agreement. 2 degrees Celsius is not only about dealing with climate impacts in societies, it's also about global catastrophic risk. It also shows that the final battle, whether we will be succeeding with Paris, does not lie in decarbonizing the energy system. It really lies in maintaining the Earth resilience and the carbon sinks in nature, about safeguarding natural ecosystems, about a development within the safe operating space of planetary boundaries. The planetary boundaries define scientific targets for the Earth system processes that maintain a stable Earth system, shown here in the green area. It shows that it's not only about climate, it's about biodiversity, it's about land, it's about water, it's about nutrients, it's about chemicals, it's about a global sustainability transition, it's about a new paradigm for prosperity and social inclusion within a stable Earth system. That's our only chance if we want to maintain the planet in an equilibrium state that is able to provide support for humanity. This is our grand quest. We need disruptive transformations to succeed. The good news is Earth is still resilient, and we have the solutions. Climate security, peace, social stability, and the ability of the world to really deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals requires that we now accelerate action and recognize that this can succeed within the safe operating space of a stable planet. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So as we've just heard, the world has already warmed up 1 degree more since the Industrial Revolution. And to avoid 2 degrees, we have a plan. We have 3 acts, actually, that we've divided all the different commitments and challenges made. The first act is how can we share and scale solutions to deliver local, national, and global action to fight climate change. The second act is to implement the solutions. And in order to implement them, how can we accelerate investments in a low-carbon and resilient economy? And the third act is how do we make sure that nobody is left behind and that vulnerable populations are protected and empowered. So let's start with our first segment for this afternoon, sharing and scaling solutions to deliver local, national, and global action. Governments, we've said again and again, can't do it alone. Regulations clearly have a very important role to play, but so does innovation. And that's going to be a big focus of all our conversations and commitments today. And it's the financial sector that's increasingly driving this cultural change, as investors recognize that this is not just something that they have to do as benevolent leaders, but it is actually in their own financial and economic interest. There are 2 major commitments I want to highlight before I bring the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, to the stage. Incidentally, the Prime Minister of New Zealand made history yesterday when she brought her 3-month-old baby to the United Nations. So the first commitment I would like to highlight is the Transport Decarbonization Alliance. The transport sector is, of course, essential, considering that it is the leading source of greenhouse gas emissions. So the Alliance, also launched last December, created 2 working groups to bring together key players from the sector to work on this key issue. And the second commitment I'd like to highlight is the carbon pricing for the Americas Coalition, which was launched by the President of Mexico. And now it gives me great pleasure to bring to the stage the President of New Zealand.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Can I start by thanking President Macron for the opportunity to speak with all of you today. I have said a few times before that climate change is New Zealand's nuclear-free moment. I want to share with you what that means. There was a time when my nation was unified by a movement against nuclear testing in the Pacific, declaring ourselves nuclear-free in the mid-1980s. At its core, New Zealand's anti-nuclear campaign was about protecting our beautiful and unique Pacific environment, our waters, our lands, and our people. We felt a sense of guardianship, or what we in New Zealand call kaitiakitanga. Today, we face a new threat. And while the same issues are at stake, there is a stark difference between the nuclear-free movement and climate change, and it is unity. In the past, we were defined as a nation by the coming together for a cause, and now, as a globe, we need to do the same again. Not because of the benefits of unity, but because of the necessity of unity. This is especially the case for the Pacific. Now, I have seen and heard this for myself on many occasions, including on a recent visit to the island nations of Samoa, Tonga, Niue, and the Cook Islands. 2 of these islands had recently endured a cyclone that had affected homes, schools, the electricity network, even the parliament buildings were destroyed utterly in Tonga. In Tonga, I met a child standing outside one of the buildings that had no roof and no internal walls. Through a translator, she told me it was her classroom. She showed me where she used to sit, and she pointed to the posters and drawings that were tattered and shredded around the room. Now, Cyclones are not new to the region, but the scale and devastation of them in recent times, that is new. But it's not only storms that threaten Pacific nations. There is already saltwater intrusion into fresh water supplies. Staple crops like taro have been devastated in some areas near the coast due to saltwater intrusion. And more importantly, some aquifers are at risk of becoming salty. In Samoa, there is a village called Moata'a, where the main pathway into town is now regularly underwater, especially at high tide. The village children now literally wade their way to school and back every day. Now, there is no question, my Pacific neighbours didn't cause climate change, but they are the front line and they are fighting it. And the message that they have given to all of us is do not give up. Climate change calls for global unified action. None of us can opt out of severe weather events or rising sea levels, so nor should we have the ability to opt out of action either. That's why in New Zealand we have made climate change an absolute priority. We are proud champions of the Carbon Neutrality Coalition launched at last year's summit, and I'm pleased that we'll be co-convening the inaugural high-level meeting of the coalition tomorrow. We will introduce in New Zealand a zero carbon bill this year to legislate ambitious goals in alignment with the Paris Agreement. No one is arguing, though, the challenges that we are facing are easy. In New Zealand, half of our emissions come from agriculture. Supplying the world with food is coming at a cost, and we're confronting the issue of how to change literally the way a cow digests food. We are proud, though, to have taken the initiative and launched the Global Research Alliance in 2009. The Alliance allows members to collaborate and pool resources so we can intensify research and share knowledge, and we now boast over 50 members. We are also focused on playing our part in making finance flows consistent with a path towards low greenhouse gas emissions and climate resilient development. We're in the process of establishing a green investment fund, for instance. And we've committed to clean, green, and sustainable energy with a goal of 100% renewable energy by 2035. And we have ended the issuing of new permits for offshore oil and gas exploration in New Zealand. This was a decision that we considered carefully. This was a decision that we considered carefully, given the impact on an entire industry and their jobs. People's employment should not fall victim to climate change too. And that's why we have set up a dedicated Just Transitions unit to support our communities, manage the transition to a clean energy future, and to support people into work. But we all know that government is just one part of the picture. Business, civil society, local communities all have to play a critical role, and there are encouraging signs. 60, for instance, business leaders representing half of New Zealand's greenhouse gas emissions have formed a coalition to set a target aligned with the Paris goals. In the financial sector, our New Zealand Superannuation Fund has been named one of the world's 25 most responsible asset allocators and is a founding member of the One Planet Sovereign Wealth Fund Working Group. But our work cannot and should not stop at our borders. We're investing, for instance, $300 million in development assistance over the next 4 years, with a majority going into our Pacific region, our Pacific neighbours, helping our Pacific neighbours to stay in their homeland. And we're pleased to be joining France and the EU to set up the Joint Pacific Initiative for Biodiversity, Climate Change and Resilience. Finally, we remain absolutely committed to playing a significant role in the world, on the world stage. The Paris Agreement, it laid the good foundations that we need, but we know that there is important work ahead. But on climate change, time is not our friend. At the upcoming meeting of the UNFCCC in Poland, parties will need to be vigilant. We have to ensure the high ambition of the Paris Agreement is accurately reflected in the rules for implementation. New Zealand has always been a firm supporter of strong multilateralist solutions to global challenges, and this is no different. We may be small, but that has never been a deterrent for us in facing big challenges. We are the first country to give women the right to vote, the first to set up a welfare state to support the poor during the depths of the Depression, and the first to scale the imposing heights of Mount Everest. We intend to be alongside you in the forefront of this challenge too. With ambition, with unity, we will, and indeed we must, succeed. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Assistant Minister of Foreign Affairs of the People's Republic of China, Zhang Jun, the Mayor of Surabaya, the Republic of Indonesia, Tri Risma, the Chief Executive Officer of Unilever, Paul Polman, the Senior Vice President and Chief Financial Officer of Alphabet and Google, Ruth Porat, and our moderator, the Editor-in-Chief of Bloomberg LP, John Micklethwaite.
Thank you very much. This is essentially a panel where the participants are here to update us on the commitments made last year at the One Planet Summit and the idea of accelerating the Paris Accord on climate change. President Macron just talked about the need for action, and this is about shared solutions, especially between the public and private sector. So what we're going to do is we're going to go backwards and forwards between the public and private sector and do roughly 5 minutes on each. But let's begin with you, Assistant Minister. Give the perspective from China. You are one of the world's biggest polluters, but you are one of the most energetic countries when it comes to trying to do something about this. How does it look from you?
Thank you. Thank you for your questions. You said that you will give me 5 minutes, but you used the 2 minutes in asking
and
questions.
I will interrupt as well.
I hope my 5 minutes will be guaranteed. And well, but let me first correct you by saying that while China is not only a big polluter in your word, but China is also the #1 contributor to the global economy. We are contributing more than 30% of the global economic growth. That's also a simple fact. But coming back to the topic, let me start by thanking President Macron and the government of France, and together with other co-sponsors, for initiating this very, very important event. Indeed, it's a meaningful one while climate change is at a critical stage. And international partnership and the international cooperation is much more needed than ever against such a backdrop. You know, people tend to look at what's happening from, as President Macron said, the chaos caused by the withdrawal of one certain country. But in my view, the global attention should keep on those who are staying with the agreement, those who are still working hard in defending this agreement. Among them is China. Let me take this opportunity to share with you that China's determination remains unchanged. China's commitment remains unchanged. And China's steps will never stop in coping with climate changes. Yes, indeed, from China's perspective, climate change is very much crucial for China's development. You know, China is really entering a new stage of its development. We are really we are really exploring a new pattern or new concept in our development, featuring coordinated, innovative, green, open, and shared economic development. You know, the key of it is to seek higher equality, higher quality of our growth, and to make it more green, to make it more low carbon.
And are there specific things that China has done over the past year that really target that?
Yes, indeed. In general, we are really transforming our economic pattern, our economic structure, and upgrading our industries, and also developing green finance. And, well, some specific things are also happening in China. As President Macron mentioned, we do believe that only actions can produce tangible results. You know, among the specific actions is the establishment of a national carbon emission trading system. That's really something called internationally by other partners. And starting from 2011, we had some pilot projects in Beijing and in some other cities. But from last year, December last year, we are making it a national one. We are talking about...
Have you managed to get businesses to get involved in that?
At this moment, 1,700 businesses, enterprises are involved in this. And the total volume for trading is more than 3 billion tons of carbon. It's really producing meaningful results. You know, together as a result of all these efforts, we are really seeing new progress. You know, by last year, our GDP per unit carbon intensity reduced by 46%. 46 is not a small number. And we have already reached our goal 3 years than scheduled to 2020. That's also something very meaningful. We are seeing some slower economic growth, but we are seeing a healthier economic structure. That's really something we want to have in China, and we hope other countries will also do the same.
Ruth, can I ask you from a business point of view, how does Google, or Alphabet, how do you look at greenery in this particular issue? What do you think you can bring to it?
So at Google, we like to say that we're technology optimists, and we believe firmly that technology can and should be used to address the biggest issues facing humanity, and clearly sustainability is right at the heart of that. So there are 4 examples I can just tick through. One, earlier this month, we were really pleased to announce Google's Environmental Insights Explorer. And for those of you who have not yet seen it, I would strongly encourage you to go Google it. We were delighted to have launched it with Bloomberg and the Global Covenant of Mayors. And what this is it's city-level data. It's designed to really help policymakers catalyze action. And it's data around things like carbon emissions from buildings and transportation. It's data around the potential for rooftop solar, again, at the city level, and also for climate forecasting. We initially launched this with city data in just 5 cities around the globe, 1 in Canada, Australia, Argentina, and 2 in the US. And just in the last couple of weeks, we've had over 100 cities reach out to us saying they want the same sort of data so they can drive action and policy.
Do you see more, we're going to come to the mayor in a second, but do you see more activity at the mayoral level than you do at the governmental level?
We certainly we're thrilled with the kind of the avalanche of interest at the city level. We are seeing a lot of activity at the city level. But we also just today announced that we're taking the same type of data. We've actually teamed up with a French utility, NG, and we're saying we want to provide similar data for companies and their customers to assess the potential for rooftop solar energy. So our view, very consistent with your opening comments, is cities need to do what they can. Companies and individuals need to do what they can. You know, another example is we're using AI to improve the energy efficiency in our data centers. We challenged ourselves. We thought we had amongst the most efficient. And with AI, we actually reduced energy requirements by 30% by focusing on cooling. I would challenge any company to question themselves, what more can we do on the efficiency within our operation? So our view is there are plenty of opportunities. It's at every level. We each have a responsibility. We think that we've just started tapping the surface of what we can do with data and technology and are excited to be a part of it.
And what happens when you go back to shareholders and you say you're spending money on these things? Do they You come from the finance side. Do they react badly?
Look, our view, and we've said this repeatedly, is that we are focused on creating value for the long term. We're a mission-oriented company. We want to make sure we're a responsible company, and this is a critical issue for society. There are plenty of opportunities to leverage the types of technology we have to address the most important issues, and that's what we're doing.
Mayor, if I can come to you, Ruth pointed out there are schemes with cities. You come from a particular city in Indonesia. You were also involved last year in the Urbis side of what was committed at the One Planet. Can you perhaps describe what's happened and what you have done?
Yes, thank you, John. I'm very honored to be here today as a mayor of Surabaya and also a global governance mayor for climate and energy. At the first edition of One Planet Summit in Paris last December, the GCOM, in partnership with the European Commission and European Investment Bank and the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, announced the creation of Global Urbis, a common framework for cities to simplify access to climate financing. At the same time, the GCOM also launched One Planet chapter, a project designed to encourage cities to make ambitious public commitment on urban mobility, renewable energy, low carbon building, and resilient and solid waste management. If we take my city for example, Surabaya, which is the second largest city in Indonesia, we are situated in only 5 meters above sea level, and we are already able to reduce the temperature by 2 degrees Celsius for 6 years by creating more than 45 hectares of urban forests, 35 hectares of green medians, and 420 city parks, and contributing to 133 hectares of green space. And because we have limited financial resources, we leverage the power of nature and communities. We call it reduce, reuse, recycle. It's our popular concept in Surabaya, and it has changed our citizen mindset and made everyone wants to be a part of making our city greenery cleaner and healthier. For example, people establish waste bank in the Nekburu area, and every year we organize a festival called Free from Garbage, where all participants wear clothes from recycled materials. We also have Surabaya bus that become the first bus allowing passengers to pay their ticket with plastic bottle. Not only does it encourage people to move from private to public transport, it's also helped our waste management and recycling efforts in Surabaya, and we are able to reduce 10% of garbage going to landfill every year.
Those are really good examples. I wonder if I can, before coming to Paul, maybe I can just quickly ask the minister from China, is this a problem in China mainly at the urban level to do with mayors?
Of course, I think mayors are really in a better position in developing specific programs in coping with climate changes and environmental protection. That's also the case in China. We are really encouraging the local governments and the urban areas to develop their own programs, especially to set their own goals in reaching, in implementing the national program and the national, in realizing the national targets. I do hope that mayors will learn from our, and then they may help a lot locally, nationally, and globally.
Paul, can we come to you? You are in charge. I know you normally do Unilever, but one of your jobs here is you are head of what's called Plan B, which sounds rather worrying. Can you describe it to us?
Well, so go back to the Sustainable Development Goals, why we're here. It is very clear that we're not even near achieving 50% of the targets we've set for the coming 15 years at the current trajectory that we're on. And it's really a plan to alleviate poverty and doing that in a more sustainable and equitable way. Climate change, goal 13, is obviously the most pertinent one. It's one that's about human development above anything else. And again, there, we're way off track, as Johan Rockström just showed. The task that we have ahead of us is kind of challenging because we do need to transform these economies, hence the plan B. We need to decarbonize our global economy. We need to move to a circular economy versus a linear economy in terms of resource use. We need to move the financial markets to the longer term. We need to find a more inclusive model of growth that doesn't go to a few, but that is to the benefit of many. These are big challenges that nobody can do alone. I think broadly we know what needs to be done. I wouldn't spend too much time anymore on the skeptics or the cynics, although they are still around and make us more determined. But broadly we know what needs to be done, but we're not going at the speed and scale that is needed.
What could make it quicker?
We created a group of people because it is no doubt that the private sector has such an enormous role to play. Globally, 60% of the GDP, 80% of the financial flow, 90% of the job creation. We simply can't solve it without the private sector, but it needs more courage. So we created a group of people, much like the mirroring of the elders, with great business people, purpose-driven, willing to take personal risks, having a little bit more courage to move this umbrella up so that others can rise as well. Around things like just transition, around things like social contract with society, around things like corruption or tax payments that we try to normally avoid to talk about as business leaders. And one of the things that we've done is create a net zero group, which means really, if you look at Paris, what we've done, we've said this is the direction we're going to decarbonize. And roughly there it says 2 degrees somewhere, but there's not really a framework in timing and commitments with hard numbers. What we really need is max peaking by 2020 and net zero by 2050. And what we're trying to do is create a big enough critical mass of businesses to get to that point. To attack the issue of climate change, you need to do a few things. You need to buy into science-based targets. We now have over $12 trillion of companies signed up on science-based targets, nearly 1,000 companies. That's the market cap of the NASDAQ. That's quite significant. Then you need to disclose the work that Mary has done on disclosing your exposure. Transparency builds trust, but also action. And then finally, more and more companies are driving an internal price on carbon. What we now need to do is align all of that with clear goals of this max peaking and net zero by 2050.
Do you think, one last thing for all of you, especially for Ruth and you, do you think that companies should actually pay for the commitments? We talked earlier, President Macron was talking about the need to raise money. Do you think companies should be particularly targeted for that?
You know, when it comes to all the 17 goals of the Sustainable Development Goals, we have waited so long, and we can continue to wait, but we've waited to a point already now, and you see that with examples of China or Surabaya, that the cost of not acting is higher than the cost of acting. We don't need to ask the question, why should business participate or who should pay for it? The ones that don't will very soon be dinosaurs. In all of the goals, climate change itself cost us $5.3 trillion. Implementing the total Sustainable Development Goals per year is a cost of $3 to $5 trillion. Conflict prevention and wars cost us $10 to $12 trillion. That's 2 to 3 times more than implementation of the overall Sustainable Development Goals. And we still run around saying that we're the most intelligent species.
Thank you. It's very rare for business people and politicians to get spontaneous applause. That seems a good time to end. I thank you very much for keeping to our very tight deadlines. My other job, apart from thanking the panel, which I hope you will all do again, is to introduce a video which I think will show some more examples of what we've talked about. But once again, thank you very much to all of you. Thank you.
I'm in charge of coordinating the work of the One Planet coalitions. What it means is that all the commitments that were made by a host of organizations in Paris, they have to report back on what they've done. We want to show that there's been progress on action. This is critical because that sort of transparency creates the trust that we need to keep building action for climate. We need to show all around the world to people that when we commit to things, it actually delivers for them on the ground concretely. We want to make sure that finance becomes sustainable and in actually redirecting towards projects for people, for climate, on the ground.
This Paris Collaborative on green budgeting is a very powerful tool because the countries spend about 40% of their GDP on public spending. How do you make sure that every one of those 40% of the GDP is actually spent in a way which is consistent? It's about looking at every part of the budget. Is it green? Is it consistent? France and Mexico started the ball rolling, and now hopefully many more countries will start to adopt this, which is fundamentally a best practice. And then we have a better chance at beating the challenge.
The Task Force on Philanthropic Innovation is a coalition of 4 governments and 16 philanthropies working together to amplify impact. Today we are sending a clear signal. We are delighted to announce the launch of the Climate Finance Partnership, led by the government of France and Germany, the Hewlett Foundation, the Grantham Foundation, the IKEA Foundation, and BlackRock. This is the first time a group of philanthropic public and private investors has committed to work together in this way. Tackling climate change requires innovative solutions. Governments and philanthropies address air quality to speed up low-carbon transport solutions for our cities. We must align our efforts towards the common goal of keeping global temperature well below 2 degrees C and keeping the window open for 1.5.
Please welcome the President of the Republic of Finland, Sauli Niinisto, the President of the Government of Spain, Pedro Sanchez Perez Castellan, the Vice President of the European Commission, Maros Sefcovic, and our moderator for the next panel, Executive Secretary of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, Patricia Espinosa.
Well, I'm delighted really to be here with this fantastic panel, an extraordinary group of leaders from Europe. And Europe has been a region that has been leading on climate change action, on addressing the problem of climate change in many ways. Today we need the leadership of Europe. Europe in order to build the guidelines for implementing the commitments that were made under the Paris Agreement that will give a policy certainty for business and for different sectors in society to act. But we also need leadership from Europe in order to demonstrate that climate action is not only possible and necessary, but it is also beneficial in terms of the economy and the well-being of the people, for a higher standard of living for the people. So I'm delighted to be able to join you today. Vice President Sefcovic, you in the European Commission have a big responsibility. You deal with different types of actions and policies in the area of climate change. What is your assessment on the impacts that those policies and actions have had so far in not only in the situation in Europe, but also globally? Yeah. And how much is international cooperation important for that?
Well, thank you, Patricia. I'm also very delighted to be in this panel and with representatives of the countries which do so well and represent this European pride in this tackling climate change leadership, because as you have said, we indeed did a lot in Europe, and I think that we are first major economy which clearly demonstrated that you can cut greenhouse gas emissions, as we did, by 24% since 1990, and at the same time you can grow your economy by more than 60%. So you can reduce greenhouse gas emission, you can create the job, and you can grow. And I think that's a very important message for all economies and for all major industrial actors that it's possible. Second thing which I would underline is that we are the first major economy which transposed our Paris commitment into the European law. And actually, we exceeded our commitments because in Paris, we promised we would reduce the greenhouse gas emission by 40%. But in the course of our legislative process over the last few years, we decided to have more renewables in our system by 2030. That will go not to 27, but to 32%. That we would increase energy efficiency to even a higher percentage of 32.5%, which I'm sure will bring us to the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions to around 45% by 2030. We are not going to stop there because we know how COP24 is important, and currently we are working on the long-term strategy, and I'm sure that all that actions we have to do in transport, in agriculture, in energy efficiency, in the buildings would lead us to having almost 90% of electricity by 2050 generated by the renewables. So I think in Europe we can demonstrate that this work, that you can lose, like for example in Netherlands, 3,000 jobs in gas sector, but at the same time you create 50,000 new jobs in a clean tech, green tech, and I think both Spain and Finland are the best examples where they can demonstrate how this was positive on economy. One last word in this introductory remarks I would make about importance of international cooperation, importance of working with continents like Africa, like our neighborhood, because we know that we still have 1.4 billion people who do not have access to electricity. And we also know that we cannot guarantee that access in a way as we did through the fossil stage, because our planet will simply not survive that. So we have to demonstrate that we are ready to help, we are ready to invest, and from European side, we are ready to channel 44 billion of euros of the investment into microgrids, into renewables, into decentralized power production, so we can create better conditions on the ground in Africa to guarantee that they would have better economic development and that they can profit from the experience we gathered in the European Union. Last thing I would mention is the importance of cooperation with the cities. With Mike Bloomberg, we are working very actively on the global covenant of the cities. We have 9,000 very active mayors, and they are fully aware that they emit 80% of the emissions in the cities, and that they are first allies and first active partners to cut the emissions from the cities going down. So these are different partnerships which we need to develop, and I believe that in this way Europe is showing how you can do it, that it's good for health, it's good for economy, it's good for people.
Thank you, Maros. Thank you. These excellent examples on how to put together legal framework, policies, partnerships, work with private sector. Thank you very, very much for that. President Sanchez, your new government has taken a very strong stance on climate change. Mm-hmm. So can you share with us what your plans are in this area for your government?
Well, first of all, let me thank the invitation, and of course, as you have said, this new Spanish government is very committed with the climate change action, and not because it's a moral issue, which is indeed, but also because if you take out the panels of scientific panels of the United Nations, Spain is going to be one of the countries touched by the climate change. And we're suffering actually this climate change situation. We are suffering desertification, we're suffering a problem of water supply, water resources, and climate change is increasing the territorial inequalities in Spain. So that is why things that we have done in these 100 days that I'm in office, first of all, what we have done is to merge the environmental department with the energy department and create a new ministry which is called ecological transition. because I think that we need to give a holistic, a horizontal response in order to handle effectively the fight against climate change. Then we are going to pass a law on climate change by the end of the year. And as the Vice President has said, for us it's very, very important to create collaborations between the three levels of the administration, municipal, regional, and national administration. I think this is the key issue because in many ways, municipalities have, let's say, the force in order to respond effectively to climate change. And then finally, because I think that we need to deliver more concrete commitments, I would be very glad to announce that my country will join the carbon neutral coalition. I think this is a very important commitment also for us. And I'm really glad to share this road with very good friends at the European level, such as my friend, President Macron.
Thank you, President. Thank you for the great news about the commitments that you are taking. We in UN Climate Change really stand ready to work with you. We're excited about it. President Niinisto, you have committed to climate neutrality policy and thereby setting an example. Can you share with us how you are doing that and also what the challenges that you have encountered in succeeding in this goal?
Yes, we really have decided to become a carbon neutral country. That is written down in our National Climate Change Act. Well, how to get there? We have different kind of levels, like we have heard here today, governmental, municipalities, cities, and I would add one very important factor here, single human persons, individuals, their behavior. What first comes to Finland and what government is doing, actually already now, when the budget is under preparation, every ministry has to take notice to Agenda 2030. So all the budgets are up to that by then are built how to reach the goal. We have prohibited using coal by 2029. That is absolute. Then if we go to city level, actually just last week, a delegation from Helsinki was here discussing with New York administration about how they can have an impact. And they agreed some kind of reporting, maybe best practices or something like that. And I think it's an excellent example because, you know, the size of the cities is a bit different. But nevertheless, the problem is common. And thus, it's easier to discuss about that. Well, then I would go to just individual level and my own example. I signed a pledge that is Citizens' Climate Pledge and promising to reduce our carbon footprint by 50% in our private householding and housing. That was successful. But what it really meant to me and family was that, you know, in the early days, we counted when we were shopping everything, well, that costs so and so many dollars or euros. I take a cheaper one or look for other alternatives. Now, easily, when I go shopping, I start thinking not the price of it, but what is the impact of it in footprint and environment. And if we get people understand this, for example, in Finland, households produce some 70% of carbon. If we can deliver this message to people who very many in households thinks today that, well, actually my behavior has nothing to do with this. But after taking such a position that it's in your head, thinking all the time, well, yes, the price in euros is not the most important thing. The most important thing is the impact of my shopping.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for that great point about how each individual can be part of this effort and how much each one of us can really make a contribution toward the solution. Thank you very much. I'm afraid that time is up. Thank you so much for sharing with us.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Norway, Erna Solberg, the Chief Executive, Secretary General, and Managing Director of the Public Investment Fund, Yasser Othman Al Rumayyan, the Chairman and Chief Executive of BlackRock, Larry Fink, and our moderator, the Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, Christine Lagarde.
Oh, that's you. Good afternoon to all of you. For those of you who are here this morning, 3 to 4, here 2 to 2. Great. President Macron, mon président, brother Jim, sister Amina, if she was around, thank you so much for your leadership, for your passion, and for your dedication and resilience on this unbelievably important project. We owe you a great deal. Now, speaking of owing something, you represent quite a bit of money around this little group here. And I'm going to turn to you, Madam Prime Minister. But before I do that, I'm just going to place two things in the room on behalf of my institution, the IMF. Price carbon, tax it, number one. For those of you who pay subsidies unnecessarily, remove the subsidies. I close the parenthesis of the IMF. Now, Madam Prime Minister, you represent the largest sovereign fund in the world. Under your leadership and as custodian on behalf of the Norwegian people, their children, their grandchildren, you move money around. But also, under the guidance and leadership of President Macron, you were one of the founding sovereign funds to actually set up that framework, which is intended to direct money from sovereign funds to green financing. Can you just tell us a little bit about that framework and what was the intention behind it?
Well, first of all, I'd just like to say something about your parent. We do tax CO2
I know.
Emissions in
But
Norway.
even when China comes on board, only 20% of emissions will be taxed. So well done. And France does it too.
But of course, we have earned a lot of money based on being in an oil and gas and a producing country. We have placed that in a sovereign fund that is for our children, grandchildren. It's the security for a nation that has a high welfare level, but who need also to have a security for long term, because oil and gas is not renewable, and we have to make sure. So the basic thing for the Norwegian sovereign fund is to make sure that the next generation also have money. So revenues is going to be important. So it's not a political tool. It's not a new instrument that we are using for the green, new innovation and green tech. But because it's long term, they have to evaluate risks. And climate risk is a real financial risk by our view. So they will have to follow up on what type of footprints the companies have that they are investing in. That means that they are demanding, the disclosure of what footprint the companies have. And in a way, the framework that we have made now is for that, saying that you have also to look at the risk in long terms for your investment, whether they will be affected by climate change or if they are part of the problem that leads to to the climate change, meaning that the large sovereign funds has to be on the side of the climate for the future with a framework that means that you have to measure, because if you measure, you manage. If you know that you are polluting, if you know that you have large CO2 emissions from companies, you will have to demand them also how to manage and how to be better on your investments for the future. That's, in fact, the basic principle of this. People who invest money, if it's private people or if it's a country like Norway, we do want to have returns on our investment because it's the security for the Norwegian people. But we want to do it on a balanced long-term basis. That means they should not contribute to the CO2 and to the emission problem, and they should ask for management from the companies that they are investing in.
Okay, return and maturity, data and risk, that is a matrix to which we will come back with you, Larry. But turning to you, Yasir, you are managing PIF. Everybody knows what PIF is?
PIF.
Huh?
PIF.
I love PIF. I think it's nice. You're going to tell us what it is and where you're going to contribute. But clearly, it's part of Vision 2030 for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And you are also a member of the framework. Tell us a little bit what it brings and how it determines your investment.
I remember a story, a book, Our Iceberg is Melting, where little penguin look at, they saw the problem that the global warming is bringing, and they started doing something about it. And I think that's what we are all doing about our environment. So we are part of the Sovereign Wealth Fund, part of the One Planet Summit, and we came up with a framework in Paris, which is based on 3 principles: the alignment, ownership, and integration. And we said, just like the Santiago principles, these are not mandatory principles, but we would like all the long-term investment firms, of course, led by the sovereign wealth funds, to use this framework in their decision-making process. And if you ask me about the PIF and why we are doing it, since we are, of course, one of the largest oil-producing countries, we still think the oil era is yet to be rejuvenated or coming again, because the demand is increasing between 3 to 6% on an annual basis, and the supply is almost the same. It's going nowhere. So that's why we said we have to be invested in renewable. We have to be invested in solar. We have to be invested in batteries. And today we had some really good news about batteries, bringing down the prices from $700 per kilowatt to $100. So this would help us all in our energy mix, to move from liquid fossil fuel to more solar and battery and more eco-friendly renewable energies. So that's exactly what we're trying to do. And at the same time, today, we're not just doing it for the sake of doing it, to be low emission and environmental friendly. Oh, that's not the only reason, to be frank with you. It's becoming really making commercial sense to us.
Because you're getting good returns?
It's getting good returns. In Saudi now, the solar kilowatt is about 2.3 cents versus 16 cents somewhere else in the world, but we're bringing it down. And I think in 2025, we're going to bring it to 1.5 cents or so. So all of this is really great. The only thing that we're missing is the batteries, the ESS. And now we have like breakthroughs there. So I think there are going to be more things. And for us, as the oil producer countries, I think it's transportation, and burning fossil fuel is not the only thing that we really want to do. I mean, there are some other stuff that we can do with oil, like oil to petrochemical, which is a big thing, and that's part of what we're doing in some of our companies, like SABIC and Aramco.
I have to say that His Majesty has agreed to actually remove some of the subsidies on fossil fuels, which is good. But between the two of you and your colleagues, you only, I was going to say, represent a little over $7 trillion. worth of investment.
Yes.
Take it or leave it. Now, on the other hand, if I turn to you, Larry. All right, for those of you who don't know Larry, let me read this. He's the founder, chairman, CEO of BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager. Total asset management in the world at the moment, securities and bonds, about 200 trillions, take it or leave it, roughly?
Yeah.
Okay, but more importantly, BlackRock has also joined the French government and also the German government, I think, and leading philanthropists to create a new climate finance partnership.
Yes, we have.
And that was set up with President Macron as either the godfather or the leader, or certainly under his impulse. Tell us a little bit about this, but also tell us about data, measurements, some of the things that Prime Minister Solberg also mentioned, which is critically important for you management decisions, and your desire to increase the volume of funds that will be green.
I first need to thank President Macron for the trust since he's here, but it was really President Macron and his entire team who really has been focused on how can we create a public-private partnership? How can we energize capital from the private sector to work side by side with governments to find solutions in renewables? And so that's the foundation of that. And we're seeing a revolution from the money owners. I mean, all our money that we manage is not our money. We don't have any money.
You don't have any money.
No, it's all our clients' money, and all our clients' money is really representing school teachers and firemen. It's mostly pension money and sovereign funds and other things. But the demand that we are starting to see for a better understanding of how to invest in environmental issues, but also governance and social issues, is becoming the #1 conversation we're having with clients worldwide. Right now, we've invested billions of dollars in renewable projects. We've done about 130 of them already in 17 countries. We just raised another multi-billion-dollar product to do the same thing. That's just the tip. That's a grain of sand. If we could develop, working with corporations, the data to understand how good governance, good management by companies in terms of in corporate responsibility of focusing on environmental issues, if we could see that, the finest companies in the world are going to outperform the weaker companies who are not focused on these issues. If we could create that type of data, every investor is going to have to focus on that type of component for investing. And if we can develop the proper data, I believe environmental investing will be in the trillions. And that's the magic. So it's a combination of inspiration from governments like France to begin this journey, because we're really only in a transition now. It's quite small, the billions of dollars that we're investing with the available capital. If we now can develop the proper data and analytics, every investor, bond, equities, alternatives across the board, will have to use this to analyze, because it will be the companies who are the most sustainable are going to be the companies that have the best financial returns. And I write all the time about corporate purpose, and I do believe corporate purpose is becoming a giant. And now with 35% of the workforce being millennials, they're demanding it.
Absolutely.
And so with all that, we are seeing a real change, and that change is just beginning. And I do believe it is going to change with the partnerships between private sector and public sector.
So it only takes somebody to get all those data together and to have the ratings that will actually satisfy your money owners, the Norwegian people under your leadership, and the kingdoms. So who can do that?
I think we all have to participate in it. We all have to be a part of it. But every company, and as owners of companies we all are representing, we have to demand that. And the companies that are going to be the leaders of tomorrow
will get priorities.
They're going to get the capital.
Yeah.
And they're going to be the winners.
So it is hereby requested now.
Yes.
You want the data?
Yes.
Okay, because I have to bring that to a close, you are all entitled to one word that you're going to leave behind.
Commitment.
Commitment.
Well, I believe, of course, in green, but I also believe in blue. I think we have to take the oceans with us on this.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, blue. And you?
I think sustainability.
Okay, commitment, sustainability, and blue. And we need the data.
And data.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this incredibly inspiring discussion. And now let's move on to the second act of this event, which tackles the critical issues of investing in the transition to a low-emission, inclusive, and resilient world economy. This transition requires the creation of new financial instruments. And in fact, already a big initiative was launched, which is called the Greening of the Financial System Network. I must say it is my favorite name of all climate change initiatives. Who can be against the greening of the financial system network? It's currently chaired by Frank Edelson from the Central Bank. And since last December, the network has worked on monitoring practices, risk analysis, and the developments of Greek markets. And now it gives me great pleasure to bring to the stage one of my personal heroes, the president of the World Bank, Jim Yong Kim.
Thank you so much, Arianna. And I want to just thank you, President Macron. You know, we first started having this discussion soon after you took office, and your commitment to continuing to keep the climate change issue in front of us has transformed our practices, and it's put pressure on everybody, including us. You know, public and private investment in climate action is beginning to flow. It's generating new jobs, improving livelihoods, and creating opportunities all over the world. The potential for dramatic investment growth, as Larry just said, is huge. According to the New Climate Economy, the shift to low-carbon resilient economies could translate into $26 trillion new dollars in economic benefits by 2030. But we need to do a lot more. You're going to hear more examples of action, but we need governments to put in place policies that help crowd in the private sector. We need the financial sector to transparently disclose its climate risks. We need sovereign wealth funds, and we heard from several. Finance markets and corporations to publicly shift away from investments that contradict our shared climate goals. And we need development finance institutions like ours to support policy reforms that create more transparent and predictable environments for climate-smart investments. But there's action on all these fronts and some good news. And so I'm reporting on where we are. In the past year, we provided a record $20.5 billion in World Bank Group finance for climate action in just 1 year. That's more than double what we did the year before the Paris Agreement. Some of you will remember that under great pressure, we committed to providing 28% of our portfolio to climate action. This year, we reached 32%. And that's now getting very close. That's getting very close to what President Macron said. A third of all investments have to go to climate action. And so I just want you to know, President Macron, we're not stopping at 33%. We're going to blow right past it. Moreover, we now factor climate into everything we do. New schools and hospitals we finance include solar rooftops and are built to withstand more intense storms and floods. The roads we help build are more climate resilient, and our energy finance is leveraging more and more private investment in renewables and energy efficiency. And moreover, my partners among the multilateral development banks reached a total of $35.2 billion, an increase of 28% in climate action in just 1 year. On top of this, we together mobilized an additional $21.8 billion in private finance. We're also working on the other commitments that we put on the table last December. We're helping India create one of the biggest energy efficiency markets in the world. We're supporting countries on the West African coast to adapt to coastal erosion and rising sea levels. And as we promised, we're well on track to ending World Bank Group investments in upstream oil and gas by 2019. And we're working with partners such as Norway and Canada to keep our oceans healthy. Today, we're launching a new global trust fund called ProBlue that will help the coastal states protect their ocean assets for the sake of the climate and future livelihoods of their people. But there's more we can do to drive new, game-changing markets for climate action. As the countries we work with invest in more wind and solar power, for example, they need to store this variable energy, renewable energy for stable, round-the-clock power. Innovations in battery storage, we heard of a fantastic one today from Patrick Soon-Shiong. Innovations can potentially address the challenge of integrating solar and wind into power grids. But batteries are expensive, and they're not being deployed at scale where they're needed most. In developing countries with strong solar and wind potential, large populations without access to electricity, and with fast-growing economies. We can change that picture. So today, I'm proud to announce the World Bank Group Global Program to accelerate battery storage at scale. We're committing, wait for the numbers. We're committing $1 billion of our own financing, and we'll raise another $1 billion in concessional climate finance to support the new program. We expect that this $2 billion will leverage an additional $3 billion in new private sector investments. Altogether, the number is $5 billion to drive battery storage deployment in developing countries. We're also working to build a global network of research institutions, development partners, philanthropies, and internal organizations to increase technological collaboration on energy storage. We will continue to do our part. We'll continue to set higher and higher, more ambitious goals, and we hope every year come back and tell you that we've met them. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the co-chair and trustee of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Bill Gates.
Well, good afternoon, and it's great to be here to address this important topic. I certainly appreciate the leadership from President Macron, Jim Kim, and Michael Bloomberg on this topic. It's a great group to talk about where we stand. A big challenge, we need to motivate huge parts of the economy to get involved. I was proud to be part of the first convening of the summit last year in Paris, and that's where it was announced that we have progress on mobilizing private capital to bring more innovations to the market to have products that reduce greenhouse gas emission. Also, we announced an initiative in agriculture together with the European Union to put an additional $300 million into agriculture research to help smallholder farmers deal with the effects of climate change. Climate change over time will affect all of us, but the people who are already experiencing its devastating impacts and are most susceptible to its worst consequences are the millions of farming families in developing countries who are struggling with extreme poverty and hunger due to low crop yields. As the climate warms and the weather becomes more unpredictable, their crops will become even less productive. So for example, instead of having 1 year in 12 where they'd have almost no harvest, that'll be down in parts of Africa to 1 year in 4. I'm optimistic we can do something about this, finding new ways both to power the world and to give everyone, including those in the poorest countries, access to clean, affordable energy that doesn't make the problem of climate change worse. The effort requires a lot of different skills. It requires governments, industry, investors, and philanthropy to come together and make good decisions based in science. Just to focus on innovations to reduce the greenhouse gas emission, our goal is to get ideas that at the early stage are very high-risk ideas, but to get them out of the labs and scale them up into products far faster. Since the first One Planet Summit, Breakthrough Energy Ventures, our investor-led fund, has more than $1 billion in committed capital, and it's made a number of growths in seed stage companies that we hope will have products on the market in just a few years. At the same time, in kind of a unique partnership, the governments around the world have committed substantial additional funds for the research to create these new products. And both governments and investors are embracing creative new approaches to address the market dynamics that in the past have made it difficult for companies to succeed. When we look at the scale of this challenge, it's important that we look at the different sectors. The electricity sector is part. However, things like storage are way more difficult than any product spec can meet today. You know, for example, take seasonal storage. What would the cost of a battery have to be to store power in the summer and make it available in the winter? We're more than a factor of 10 away from anything that would make that type of base load reliability possible. Also, we often don't think about the industrial sector, which actually is a greater greenhouse gas emitter than the electricity sector. And we haven't had the same sorts of things like we have renewable energy, even for those summer and when the wind is blowing or the sun is shining type capacity. So whenever we think about these financings or ratings, just consider what is going to happen with livestock and land use. That's a huge sector. What is going to happen in the industrial sector for, say, making steel? There's no economic process for making steel without greenhouse gas emissions, or fertilizer, or plastic, or the things that industrial society depends on. So without innovation that goes across all the sectors where we've got greenhouse gas emission, it's going to be difficult. Now, I'm a huge believer in innovation. We've seen it in health. We're orchestrating the scientists, the research funds, and the investment to drive those forward. Switching to talk about reducing the harm that the warming that's already built in with, of course, quite a bit of legs. So what you're seeing today is very small compared to what you'll see 20 years from now, 40 years from now. And that would be true even if we zeroed out greenhouse gas emissions today, because the warming effects are very lagged, particularly the CO2-driven effects. So, we've just seen the beginning of those impacts. And in some ways, we're not even tracking what it's doing now to these farmers. However, here again, there's hope. Better seeds, better practices can raise the productivity during the good years enough so that you can more than offset some of that weather variance. The European Commission has responded to the challenge, and I'm pleased to say we're working with them to co-invest £50 million this year in 3 exciting new projects. And we're working together to pick even more projects for 2019 and 2020. We'll each invest more than the 50 million euros each year in specific pilot projects that help smallholder farmers. I'm also excited about the work going on in agricultural R&D. Our foundation committed $300 million at the summit, and we've already spent over 1/3 of that on very, very promising new things. At the basic level, the world has a system called the CJIR that are the groups that do the basic technology to improve these seeds. They fostered the green revolution that avoided the famine in Asia. There's another almost factor of 3 in doing that very well, particularly for characteristics like drought tolerance or heat tolerance that will be increasingly important. Also salt tolerance, as the water's coming in and affecting a lot of these agricultural deltas in places like Vietnam. You've got to have new seeds that are not killed by that assault infestation. We need to partner at the national level to get those seeds, particularly for the staple crops, and particularly for the crops that are used in Africa, so that they're adapted to the ecologies and getting out to the farmers and getting feedback from those farmers. We also need to inform those farmers. We need digital soil maps for fertilizer. We need digital systems to help advise those farmers. As part of my personal commitment on these efforts, I'm looking forward to joining a new global commission on adaptation. And that's being led by former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and World Bank CEO Kristalina Georgieva and a number of other people to really split off and say, okay, what about the adaptation effort? In some ways, mitigation, which is super important, deserves all the attention it's getting, but it's meant that this adaptation piece, including the investments the world makes to help these farmers, has actually been going down over the last 20 years. We're at a moment of high risk, but also great promise. We need policies to support the adoption of these technologies and to help vulnerable populations adapt. We need to make sure that governments and other stakeholders are supporting innovation and helping make sure those innovations get delivered, whether it's in agriculture, energy, the industrial sector, the transport sector, all these different sectors, which is where the greenhouse gas emissions are. I feel sure that if we drive innovation, surprise ourselves with some breakthroughs, we will be able to reduce the emissions, increase access to affordable energy, and help the poorest, including farmers everywhere, have more productivity despite the challenge of climate change. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Luis Moreno, President of the Inter-American Development Bank.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, President Macron. As Jim Kim, my colleague, was saying, all of the banks are doing a lot. In fact, we are getting close to 50% of our lending devoted to climate change. But let me just give you a statistic. Latin America and the Caribbean represent about 8% of the landmass of the world and 40% of the biodiversity. So what we're doing today is announcing the creation of a natural capital lab. And this will be a space where governments and businesses can work together, thereby incubating projects that can yield breakthroughs in how we finance key areas such as conservation, landscapes, biodiversity, and marine ecosystems. This lab will seek other partners to craft high-risk, high-reward approaches to those challenges. And the successful projects will then be scaled up using the resources, among others, of the Global Environment Facility, the French Development Agency, public funds, private sector investments, and the IDB private sector and public sector portfolio. I am thrilled today to say that with the help of the government of France, they are seating as a pioneer partner in this lab, aiming with an initial pledge of $25 billion. And we hope to bring other partners. And for this, I want to especially thank you, President Macron, to thank the French Secretary of State, my good friend Brune Poisson, as well as the great director of the French Development Agency, Rémi Rioux, and the French Ministry of Finance for this very visionary commitment. And as the founding donor of the lab, France will help to fund the first round of projects, and we are confident that many other donors will soon follow this example. So as President Macron liked to say, we are on march to Latin America. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Luis. And now to talk further about how we can push the frontiers of blended finance, I'm delighted to have a discussion with Governor Mark Carney, the Governor of the Bank of England. And let me check my spelling and my pronunciation, Valdis Dombrovskis, the Vice President for the Euro and Social Dialogue. He was born in Latvia. I was born in Greece. And he tells me that my Latvian accent is okay. It might be better than my English accent. So, Mr. Vice President, I would love to ask you specifically, what concrete steps has Europe taken, and how do you manage climate risk and help drive investments?
Good afternoon. First of all, I would like to outline that what we are seeing this summer with extreme weather events, it has been an eye-opener for many people, and we have been discussing in this summit before, but it only confirms an existing trend, because according to NASA, 17 out of 18 hottest years in recorded history had been since the year 2000. So clearly nature is sending us a warning signals. We are at 2 minutes to midnight and time to act is now. So Europe is committed to implement its Paris climate change goals, and for this we will need finance. We have an estimate that we need approximately 180 billion euros additional investment every year for the next decade to meet our Paris climate change goals. So we need to put this investment. So what we have proposed from the European Commission side that as of 2021, EU devotes quarter of this budget to climate-related action. This would make up 320 billion euros for a 7-year period. But the reality is that public finance alone will not be enough. That's why we put forward our action plan for sustainable finance, how we can incentivize private finance to put its full weight behind our climate commitments. And there we have already put forward 3 concrete laws or draft laws within this action plan. So first is on classification system or taxonomy to define in the financial sector, in the financial products, what is green and what is not. Second, we put forward proposal on positive carbon impact and low carbon benchmarks to help more finance to flow towards decarbonizing our economy. And third is on disclosures, so how environmental and climate change objectives are reflected in financial companies' disclosures. Because the truth is that investors want to put lots of money in those goals. There is data that 3/4 of potential investors, of people, retail investors, are saying that they are having environmental and climate change objectives more important now than they had 5 years ago. And among young people, this figure is even much higher. So clearly there is demand. So what we need to create is also supply and clarity. So among the next steps is to create an EU label for green financial products, so that also retail investors, which are maybe not very sophisticated, can easily tell which investment options are green. And we are looking at how we can more, in the non-financial disclosures, environmental, social governance disclosures, how we can more put climate-related issues. And there we are going to follow up the FSB task force of climate-related financial disclosures, which was excellent work done under the leadership of Mark Carney and Mike Bloomberg, how we can align our EU requirements more closely with the work of FSB task force. So to summarize on this, we hope that at the end of the day, we'll be able to make the sustainable finance, green finance, a new normal, with green and sustainable projects flowing across Europe, flowing across entire globe, and creating millions of new jobs in the transition to the low carbon economy. And in the EU, just a final thought, we see that there is no contradiction. Since 1990, we have reduced our carbon emissions by 22%. At the same time, our GDP has increased 50%. So there is no contradiction between reducing emissions and ensuring economic growth.
Thank you so much. Thank you for reinforcing this point, which is central for progress. And Governor Carney, how do you see all this climate change-based financial information actually facilitate, the capital markets to go beyond short-termism and to actually encourage investments in this market?
Okay. Well, that's the key question. And if I may, you started on the frontier of finance, and this is about moving climate to the mainstream of finance, and it's happening quite quickly. Let me go quickly through demand, supply of data, and how, what it means for long-term value creation and action. We're here for action, as the President said at the start. In terms of demand for this data, I should put some numbers on it. A year ago, there was about 25 trillion of assets under management, a huge number, a third of global GDP that was behind this initiative, catalyzed by the One Planet Summit in Paris in December, and work over the course to today. That number is $100 trillion. It is 8 of the 10 largest asset managers. It's 3/4 of the globally systemic banks. As we just heard in a previous panel, it's the major sovereign wealth funds with a separate initiative. Major pension funds ensure the demand is there. I'll give you one other piece in terms of the demand, which we oversee a fair chunk of the banking system, the Bank of England, $11 trillion of assets. We've just released a report today which looks at banks who normally have a shorter horizon than other investors. How are they looking at this issue? We find that 70% of the banks that we oversee view climate as a financial risk now, not a corporate social responsibility, a financial risk. So this is moving very fast on the demand side. Supply side, are people getting the information? There's a report released today by the TCFD, this task force, which looks at almost 2,000 companies across the world, equally spread by geography and industry, and they find that the vast majority are disclosing aspects of this information, so some aspects of the TCFD, and there certainly are some best-in-class preparations, and some of the companies are here today. We see industry fora running from the banking sector through the IIF to the oil and gas sector through an oil and gas industry group that's getting best-in-class treatment for this. So we're going to see the supply. But a big point I would make is that the results came out, or the report came out last summer, 2017. Companies had a very short window to adopt those and actually disclose. By next summer, they will have had a longer window. They will have information. They will have had support. And for the Japanese G20 in June, the TCFD will be reporting. So companies will either be disclosing or hiding. And the question is, are you acting? Are you disclosing? Are you moving? To your core of your question in my last minute or so, how does this relate to long-term value creation? The best companies, and a number of the biggest investors are here know this and have been pushing this, the best companies react to big structural change, whether it's machine learning, artificial intelligence, whether it's demographics, or the future of the planet. And there is a correlation between those who focus on those big issues, core to their business, and those who focus on climate-related issues. What we've found is that there are two virtuous cycles, and I'll finish with this, created here. One is the more companies that disclose, the easier it becomes to disclose, and the more questions will be asked of those who don't disclose. And then secondly, and this is crucial for the policymakers in the room and beyond, is that what is the market really good at? It's pulling forward future events. It's anticipating what is going to happen and rewarding best performers today, rewarding those with foresight, and punishing, quite frankly, those who aren't looking far enough into the horizon. As Paris is turned into commitments, as the policies are turned into commitments, credibility will be built up, and the impact of those policies and the credibility of the policymakers gets brought forward in the market today with the proper disclosure, and you will see action as a consequence of it.
Well, this is one of the most optimistic statements of this whole day because moving climate change beyond social responsibility to the center of financial calculus and business metrics is going to be game-changing, especially with so many millennials craving, more transparency and more purpose. So thank you both so much for the work you're doing and for being here today.
Thank you very much.
And now a little more cause for optimism. To report on some of the commitments made last year, we have a few testimonials.
The IDFC has received the message from COP21 loud and clear. Since then, we doubled our climate finance, both on mitigation and adaptation, $100 billion in 2015, $200 billion in 2017. We are the group of the 23 largest national and regional development banks. We finance clean energy, mass transportation, water and sanitation. We all align with the Paris Agreement process.
The development finance institutions have a very strategic role in helping countries implement the Paris Agreement. Development finance institutions, together with the multilateral development banks, have a role to catalyze the private sector so that we can be able to create for a much more cleaner environment. It's quite key that we make sure that the issues of poverty, especially in emerging countries, and the issues of unemployment and inequalities are seriously addressed.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our panelists. The President of the Republic of the Marshall Islands, Hilda Heine. The President of the Togolese Republic, Faure Gnassingbé. Executive Vice President, the Balbo Group, Leontino Balbo. And our moderator, the Chief Executive of the Zain Verji Group, Zain Verji.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. 17 of the 18 warmest years in recorded history have all come this century. Oceans have risen 3 inches in 25 years. Evidence shows that both trends are just worsening. It's the vulnerable populations that cannot cope. So what are the specific innovative solutions we have that can be scalable, that can be efficient? So on this panel, we're going to take a look at how technology and nature-based solutions can help develop new business models. I'd like to start the conversation with President Heine of the Republic of the Marshall Islands. You're chairing the Climate Vulnerable Forum, and that's essentially a coalition of 48 countries vulnerable to climate change. And you're also going to be hosting the first ever online Climate Summit on the 22nd of November. Just tell us a little bit about that and how it's going to contribute to the climate agenda.
Thank you, Zain. Thank you for the wonderful question. Before I answer your question, I'd like to start by thanking President Macron for conceiving and convening the One Planet Summit. Marshall Islands is a supporter of the summit, and we participated in the first summit. And in that summit, we, together with New Zealand, co-sponsored the Carbon Neutrality Coalition. And from that, we've worked forward and we've developed our 2050 strategy, and we launched that this year. Not this year, but this week. This is our, we're serious. We're committed to carbon neutrality, and we're working and trying to convince and encourage all other countries to move in that direction. We also, during that summit, we supported the Tony de Broom Declaration on Shipping. And through that work, we've been able to work with IMO to get to set cap on shipping emissions. Although it's not at the target we wanted, it's a beginning, and we want to work towards more. Now, coming to Climate Vulnerable Forum, Marshall Islands, of course, is a very vulnerable country. We're chairing this group of countries, of vulnerable countries, because we're very serious and want countries to take their role in controlling climate emissions, as well as to look at adaptation. So on November 22nd, we will be convening this virtual forum.
How's that going to work?
Where we're inviting countries. They can send us a tape of a statement, of videotape of their statement, or they can go on live and show the world what they're doing to contribute to solving the problem of climate change.
And what kind of impact do you want that to have?
Well, we want all countries as much as possible to take part, to increase their emission. I think the whole idea is to encourage countries to step up their emission standards and also move towards renewable energy so that we can control the emission standards that are out there. Thank you.
President Faure Gassinbe, Togo has been very active to support and develop investments in solar energy within the framework of the International Solar Alliance, that you're also working with other African countries in the region, trying to create a platform to accelerate the mobilization of funds for the solar projects in the region. Can you explain this in a little bit more detail, as well as how this initiative is going to protect the vulnerable?
Thank you very much. I would also like to thank President Macron and the other organizers of this summit. And I want to say that the Solar Alliance is an initiative from France and India to promote the investment in solar technology. Before that, Togo was on a path of increasing the access to energy by 2030 from 40% to 60%. But today, with the new technologies and with a new strategy, I think by 2030, we can reach the 100%. This is how the technology can impact the access to energy. Having said that, Togo is not the only country in Africa. We have many countries. The initiative that we are taking is to try to tap into the financial resources of the private sector, because the government, the states, are limited in their resources. How to do that? By creating that platform. To create that platform, we want to engage with the investors, with those who build the equipment, to see what will they need to have a safer environment in Africa. And we are willing to change our regulations. We have common regulations. We're willing to have common specification for the equipment, etc. But only by engaging them will we know what needs to be done, with the aim of having a bigger market, a safer market, and to do it quick.
What is the greatest challenge you have now, and how would you advise it be resolved based on the successes that Togo's been having?
The greatest challenge is to make the difference between the availability of energy and the access to energy. And that concerns the most vulnerable populations, because we do not have guarantees to de-risk the investment in very remote areas in African countries. We need to give access to very vulnerable families. Why do we need that? Take a widow in a remote country, place in my country. Every morning she has to travel maybe 5-10 kilometers to cut the wood and come back and prepare. That person can have access to energy if we reduce the risk. How to do that? It's very expensive, but we need to do that. That is the sense of the common battle that we are fighting to save and to preserve our planet. So what we need is to try to find a mechanism to reduce the risk in investing in remote areas. If we don't do that, we will not win the battle against the climate change.
Leontino Balbo, the private sector. The President just talked about that. It's really key for our resilience to climate change effects. So how can nature-based solutions benefit the planet overall, biodiversity and vulnerable populations, and still enable businesses to grow?
Our project is a live example on how nature-based solutions can have their effects multiplied when combined with technological innovation. So after 25 years studying how the life evolved over the Earth crust, we could understand on how to replicate those natural processes in the cropland. And after 25 years of practicing that life-friendly production model, we could scientifically document the restoration of the soil, original features and fertility, the improvement of the water availability in the farms, the explosion of the life in all its trophic levels, biodiversity, and besides providing a new production model with a strong carbon sink. It releases at least 40% less carbon than conventional methods. And the yields in the last 20 years has been 25% higher than in São Paulo state average. And finally, the most amazing result of this learnership was that we understood the plants, they carry an immunological system. Science didn't know. And now we learned how to physiologically induce a plant to activate their immunological system in a way that they turn themselves immune to 90% of the most common plague and disease.
And very briefly, what would you say was a key next step needed to scale up the nature-based solutions?
I have a lot of knowledge, as well as my team. I know other people who have the knowledge here and there. We need to systematize this knowledge in a way that it becomes accessible to all kinds of growers.
Thank you very much. We're going to have to leave our brief conversation there, unfortunately, but we know that we can go on to the online summit,
yes,
November 22nd, and we look forward to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Down there.
What an inspiring afternoon this has been. It seems crystal clear from everything we've heard that action is being taken and progress is being made. But for this progress to continue, we need real global leaders who will not shrink from the responsibilities of leadership and who will not retreat into isolationism. We basically need leaders who will answer the call of history. And so it is a real honor to bring back to the stage, to close our session, a global leader who has really wholeheartedly answered the call of history, the President of France, President Emmanuel Macron.
Thanks very much. I was very happy to be here from the very first second to the very last one, because we are changing all the classical way to proceed, because normally a leader gives his speech and leaves the room. So I was very happy to be with you and listen to you and to your commitment and to your actions. And I have to say, as a French president, and I noticed in this room, sorry to speak one sec about my country, but I noticed the presence of CEO of Engie, Total, BNPP, Danone, and they took on their time many hours to be here. A few years ago, especially some companies supposed to be part of the old business, it was totally, just impossible to imagine the presence in such a room during 2 hours. It means something. It means that something is changing, and the mindset of a lot of people is changing. I think what we've just experienced is a very new way to proceed, with clear commitments, unprecedented presence of leaders, and I just want to wrap up this session. On the government side, we noticed the commitments made by several leaders to join the different initiatives, to launch new initiatives, regional initiatives for Pacific with New Zealand, for Caribbeans, Africa, but as well global initiative for carbon neutrality. And I want to thank all these leaders for this initiative. And I have to say, we have to go further and faster. And I want to support the initiative announced by the European Commission. I do support the Sustainable Finance Initiative taken by the Commission. And I think we have to go further and beyond the current functioning of our CO2 pricing and our CO2 market. We have to decide a floor. And we have to push people to invest much more in green energy and decide ourselves to create new incentives. That's for the leaders and the government side. Second, finance. Obviously, with Prime Minister of Jamaica, we are very honored by the mandate given by Secretary General, but I'm extremely cautious with ourselves. We are collectively big specialists of greenwashing. So the famous 100 billion could be a pure bullshit. So we will do our work and our job to deliver, but much more important than that, for me, the main purpose of our action with Prime Minister of Jamaica will be the change of the core model. It's not to say we will take a few dollars of the big guys to put it on finance. No, what we want to do is to change the philosophy and the in-depth functioning of finance. And that's why, for me, the second key outcome and takeover of this panel and this meeting is about climate finance, and especially different discussions we have in the climate finance partnership. We managed to convince several sovereign wealth funds. They committed, they decided to invest much more, and it was a great job, and thanks for that. And they did it, and it was very well explained by our friends, by Arianna and by the CEO of the PIF, because it makes sense for the business, because it is profitable for them and for their stakeholders, and because it's good for the children. I mean, we had several leaders and some finance leaders in this room, and they are deciding to join this club. And the Climate Finance Partnership, for me, is precisely a very important change, and this is the tipping point. So I want us now to accelerate, to get new commitments from the private sector and the finance sector. Why? Because it's more money to finance our transition, and because it is more incentives on corporates. I think we have two very important allies to mobilize in this battle. Citizens, they are here and they push us, and investors. Because when banks, investors join the club through these initiatives, they push basically the companies to change their mindset and precisely to go further. So this climate finance partnership was a very important achievement of this session, and I want us to accelerate and go much further and faster on this track. Third, World Bank and Development Bank. Thanks very much, Jim, for your commitments on battery, on the big shift of basically your bank and your balance sheet toward climate. I mean, it's your core business for sure. But what you announced today was very important. But I want as well to thank and encourage the different regional development bank, EIB, IBD, and so on, to go further and faster as well. And that's why I do confirm, indeed, the French initiative for the National Capital Lab, and we will put this 24 million euro on the table in order to finance this lab and to finance this initiative on biodiversity. This is a very important step forward. I do believe this is just our duty because we are part of this continent, because France is part of this continent, and because I do believe indeed the role of Latin America and South America in terms of biodiversity and the fact that 40% of biodiversity is precisely in this continent is very important. In the margin of the G20 with the president of Argentina and some other leaders, we will announce new initiatives in this framework. Fourth point, and my last one, how to go further and faster broadly. I think your commitments and your pledges today were very important, and thanks for that. But several leaders made very clear that emission, CO2, could not be the unique purpose and the unique fight. And a lot of leaders made very clear that this initiative now has to be the very core initiative of our current functioning, our way to proceed. It's not just one event every year or every 6 months, but it's how to make it in the middle of the global business model. So that's why I do believe that this One Planet Summit Lab is a very important initiative, and we will encourage it. Having a lot of CEOs, a lot of leaders thinking about how to innovate and how precisely to go much further, how to scale the very first initiatives, to broaden them is a very important one. But I think we should have 3 main objectives. Emission, obviously, and CO2, but as well ocean and biodiversity. And what we have to do now is obviously to follow up. We will have a very important meeting in Nairobi, first semester 19, precisely to follow up this achievement. But we have to enlarge our ambition, and now we have to show people that we are changing the core of the system, the core of our business model, the core of our governance. That's why this lab, for me, should be used by all of you to push and promote initiatives, smart initiatives and small initiatives, to try to accelerate them and build new role models. That's why we have now to enlarge the spectrum of our initiatives from just CO2 to biodiversity and ocean, and be sure these 3 pillars are the core elements of our collective action. And that's why what I want to propose you now is to have all these people being part of the French G7 for 2019. I want to put you at the middle of the G7. 2019, France will be the chair of this G7. I put inequalities as, I would say, the main objective of this G7. I want precisely to change a lot of forums. I want to associate different powers and countries to deliver new results and innovate. But I think this One Planet Club should be part of these new global leaders. And what I want to propose is precisely on the basis of these initiatives, the 12 programs launched in Paris, the new commitments and pledges taken today, and based on the work you will make from now to summer 19, to have on these 3 pillars I mentioned, very concrete and strong initiative for global leaders. This is my commitment as an upcoming chairman of this forum, which means you will have to work again, find new ideas, but I'm sure that if you are committed to this mission, if you are convinced that it is no more just about words, speeches, but achievements, commitments, accountability, initiatives, we can completely shift 20, 30% of our main businesses, which means we can change the current global environment. And it should be one of the main objectives of the Biarritz meeting we will host in August 2019. And that's why I need you for that. So thanks very much for your presence today. Thanks very much for being part of this One Planet Summit. And now, I think I want to make this club the club for millennials and the club to deliver and be accountable for these new initiatives. So thanks very much for that, and see you in Nairobi, in Biarritz, and in a lot of capitals where we will share new achievements. Thanks very much. For the very good work. Thanks, Arianna. Thank you.
Launched at the first One Planet Summit, the Climate Action 100+ initiative is the largest global engagement strategy that involves institutional investors coming together and engaging with the largest greenhouse gas emitters in the world. When it was launched, we had about 225 institutional investors representing just about $25 trillion in assets under management. And today we have 296 institutional investors representing $31 trillion in assets under management. And we've also had a fifth of the companies now really coming forward with long-term plans about how they're going to reduce their emissions from 2030 and beyond. So this is quite an extensive response from these companies. And this is just 9 months into the initiative, so we can only imagine what will happen as we continue to scale up and when we have institutional investors collaborating in these engagements.
The objective of the fund is very clear. The projects it supports are concrete, and the link with the Sustainable Development Goals is direct. The objective of the fund is to make a difference while being profitable, which is exactly what private investors are looking for. We had a chance to have Agence Française de Développement and European Investment Bank on board from the start. Their deep knowledge of agroecology, finance, natural capital has been key. They have acted as mentors while the fund was being developed before becoming their first investors.
About 10 projects like sustainable forestry production in Africa or restoration of coffee farms in Latin America will be financed by the LDN Fund in 2019. These are innovative investments to restore degraded land and so much more. They will help fight climate change because soil captures carbon, because healthy soils also store more water. These investments will help farmers boost food production and generate thousands of good jobs and opportunities in rural areas.
The Space Climate Observatory that we call VSCO intends to create a very powerful tool to aid the populations under threat from rising sea level, coastal erosion and drought. VSCO's goal is to pool and standardize climate data from climate monitoring satellite. Out of the 50 essential climate variables, 26, more than half, can be observed just by satellites. And so VSCO will be built in an international cooperation, and the idea is to standardize the data and to make them accessible to the whole scientific community worldwide. We can bring a lot of information to population, and it is very, very important to tackle climate change and also to monitor their effects, which could be a very big problem for these populations.
In Andhra Pradesh, there is a vast amount of land that has been damaged by pesticides and fertilizers. That state in India has decided to become much more ecologically sustainable thanks to a new approach, the zero-budget natural farming. But that approach in the scaling up requires a lot of funding. A bank like ours can bring together stakeholders, private investors that will provide funding, development banks that will provide guarantees, UN agencies, NGOs, governments that will make sure the project meets requirements. That approach can bring a huge amount of financing to the UN sustainable goals.
For the Pacific community, the initiative complements the work that we are doing in climate change biodiversity. It's particularly important for the coastal inshore environment, where fish and seafood constitute 80% of the protein source for small Pacific Island communities. So the protection of biodiversity in the marine and coastal environment is very important.
This very important initiative will address three major areas in the Pacific. First of all, used oil. This is a critical area that we need to address. Secondly is the area of marine debris, particularly plastics. The scientists tell us that if we continue on current trends, by 2050 we'll have more microplastics in the oceans than fish. So it's a food security issue. The third area that this important initiative will focus on is waste emanating from disasters. As you know, the Pacific is a very vulnerable region. And so this initiative will go a long way in addressing the issue of waste from storms, from flooding and extreme weather events.